The forest whispered with an otherworldly hush as Jake stumbled through the darkness, his flashlight cutting weak beams through the thick, looming trees. He had ventured alone into the heart of the wilderness for a solo camping trip, seeking the solace that only nature could provide. But tonight, the wind carried an eerie melody, and shadows danced in ways that defied the logic of the natural world. As Jake fumbled to set up his tent, a shiver ran down his spine. He dismissed it as a product of the chilly night, but an unsettling feeling lingered in the air. The trees seemed to close in around him, their branches forming gnarled hands that reached for him in the shadows. An owl hooted in the distance, its call echoing through the quiet night like a foreboding omen. The crackle of a distant twig underfoot sent Jake's heart pounding. He turned, the beam of his flashlight revealing nothing but the blackness of the forest. He laughed nervously, blaming his paranoia on the solitude. "Just my imagination," he muttered to himself. As the fire crackled in front of his tent, Jake felt a false sense of security. The flames cast long, flickering shadows that seemed to dance with a life of their own. He tried to shake off the unease, convincing himself that the forest was simply playing tricks on his mind. But then he heard it, a soft whisper on the wind, like a ghostly breath in his ear. Alone. The word hung in the air, sending a chill down Jake's spine. He scanned the darkness, but there was no one in sight. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice shaky. No response. Uneasiness settled over him like a heavy fog. He retreated into his tent, zipping it up tight as if the thin fabric could protect him from whatever unseen presence lurked outside. In the confined space, the only sounds were his own breathing and the rustle of leaves in the wind. Just as Jake convinced himself that he was being foolish, the forest erupted into a cacophony of bizarre sounds. Whispers grew louder, the wind carried an eerie melody, and the trees seemed to moan in agony. It was as if the entire forest had come alive with an otherworldly energy. Suddenly, the flames outside his tent flickered and dimmed. The forest fell silent, leaving only the rhythmic beating of Jake's heart to fill the void. He strained to listen, his senses on high alert. Then, a single haunting note resonated through the air. It was a melody that seemed both beautiful and malevolent, pulling at the edges of reality. The source became clear as Jake's eyes widened in terror. The ghostly figure of a woman, draped in tattered white, stood at the edge of the firelight. Her eyes glowed with an unnatural intensity as she continued to play the ethereal tune on a violin that seemed to materialize out of thin air. The whispers returned, this time forming words that echoed through the night. Alone but not forgotten, trapped in the realm between the living and the dead. Jake's mind raced as he realized the chilling truth. He was not alone, and the forest held ancient secrets that defied comprehension. The haunting melody continued, wrapping around him like a spectral shroud, and the shadows deepened, revealing more ghostly figures emerging from the trees. The air grew colder, and Jake could feel the presence of countless unseen eyes fixed upon him. Desperation set in as he fumbled for his flashlight, but the feeble beam seemed powerless against the encroaching darkness. In the suffocating silence that followed, the ghostly orchestra played on, and the forest embraced Jake in its chilling embrace, revealing that his solitary camping trip had taken an unforeseen turn into a realm of spectral horror. Paralyzed with fear, Jake huddled in the corner of his tent, his eyes wide with terror as the haunting melody enveloped him. The ghostly figures advanced, their movements graceful yet eerie, as if time had frozen around them. Their eyes bore into his soul, and their whispers became a dissonant symphony of lost souls longing for release. In the heart of the spectral congregation, the woman in white continued to play the haunting tune on her ethereal violin. Her gaze never left Jake, and with each melancholic note, the barrier between the living and the dead seemed to thin. Desperation clawed at Jake's throat as he searched for an escape. He fumbled for his phone, praying for a signal that could pierce through the supernatural barrier surrounding him. To his dismay, the device remained stubbornly silent, its screen mocking him with the absence of a signal. The ghostly figures closed in, their movements synchronized with the ghostly melody. Panic surged through Jake as he realized that the only way out was to confront the spectral presence that had emerged from the heart of the ancient forest. Summoning every ounce of courage, He unzipped the tent and stepped into the otherworldly scene. The woman in white paused in her haunting melody, the ghostly ensemble freezing in a spectral tableau. She turned her gaze upon Jake, her eyes holding the weight of centuries. "Alone," she whispered, the word resonating with an otherworldly power. "Why are you haunting me?" Jake stammered, his voice barely audible over the spectral murmurs that surrounded him. The woman's eyes softened with a mixture of sorrow and understanding. "Alone, lost, forgotten," she murmured, her voice a haunting lament. "Trapped between worlds, seeking release." As she spoke, the ghostly figures began to blur and fade, their forms dissipating like mist in the morning sun. The forest, once alive with otherworldly energy, returned to an eerie stillness. In the sudden silence, the woman in white approached Jake. She reached out a spectral hand, and as her fingers touched his forehead, a surge of memories flooded his mind. The forest, once a sacred place, had become a gateway between realms. The woman and her companions were souls trapped between life and death, longing for release. With a final mournful glance, the woman in white and the spectral ensemble dissipated into the shadows, leaving Jake alone in the quiet forest. The haunting melody lingered in the air, a fading echo of the supernatural encounter. As the first light of dawn painted the sky, Jake remained in the clearing, trying to comprehend the surreal events of the night. The forest, once a place of solace, now held secrets that transcended the boundaries of the living and the dead. With a heavy heart, he packed his belongings and left the ancient woods, forever changed by the chilling encounter with the spirits that dwelled in the darkness. Little did he know, the haunting melody would stay with him, a ghostly reminder that some mysteries are better left undisturbed, and the line between the living and the dead is a fragile boundary that can be crossed under the shadow of the ancient trees. The moon hung low in the ink-black sky, casting a feeble glow over the dense forest. The crackling of the campfire echoed through the silent night, accompanied by the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. Mark sat alone, his face illuminated by the flickering flames as he roasted marshmallows. His camping trip had started as a relaxing escape from the hustle of everyday life, but as the night wore on, a sense of unease settled in. He glanced around the dark expanse of the woods, feeling a shiver crawl up his spine. The towering trees seemed to close in, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers in the dim light. The rustling leaves now sounded more like distant whispers, and the once inviting shadows took on a sinister quality. Brushing off his growing discomfort, Mark decided to call it a night. He doused the fire and crawled into his sleeping bag inside the tent. The only sounds now were the hooting of distant owls and the rustle of nocturnal creatures. As he lay there trying to shake off the eerie feeling, he heard something that made his blood run cold. Footsteps. They were soft, almost imperceptible, but distinct enough to send a chill down Mark's spine. He strained his ears, attempting to discern whether it was just his imagination playing tricks on him. The footsteps continued, slow and deliberate, drawing closer to the tent. Panic set in, and Mark's heart pounded in his chest. "Hello," he called out, hoping it was a fellow camper or a lost hiker. The only response was the haunting silence of the night. He unzipped the tent and peered outside, but the darkness swallowed everything. Mark shook off the unease, convincing himself it was probably just an animal. As he settled back into his sleeping bag, the footsteps returned, now louder and accompanied by an eerie, guttural whisper. Mark's breath caught in his throat as he strained to make out the words. They were indistinct, like a language he couldn't comprehend. Goosebumps covered his skin as the whispers seemed to surround him, closing in from all sides. The forest outside his tent felt alive with a malevolent energy, and Mark's mind raced with terrifying possibilities. Was it a prank, or had he stumbled upon something more sinister in the woods? He considered packing up and leaving, but the fear held him in place, rooted to the spot. Suddenly, the whispers coalesced into a chilling chant, echoing through the trees. Mark's heart raced as he recognized his name woven into the haunting melody. He could no longer dismiss it as his imagination. Something otherworldly was happening. The tent seemed to vibrate with an unnatural energy, and the air grew thick with an oppressive force. In a desperate attempt to escape, Mark unzipped the tent once more, only to be met with a blinding light that engulfed him. The world around him twisted and contorted, as if reality itself was unraveling. The whispers reached a fevered pitch, drowning out all rational thought. And then, as abruptly as it began, the light vanished, leaving Mark disoriented and alone in the silent woods. The footsteps, the whispers, everything had ceased. The once foreboding shadows now seemed harmless, and the trees stood sentinel in the moonlight as if nothing had transpired. Mark was left with a chilling realization. He was no longer alone, and something inexplicable lurked in the depths of the night. Shaken and bewildered, Mark stumbled out of his tent into the disorienting aftermath of the mysterious encounter. The forest, though eerily silent, felt different now, as if the very essence of the woods had shifted during those unsettling moments. Mark rubbed his eyes, half expecting to wake up from a nightmare, but the chill in the air and the lingering sense of unease confirmed the disturbing reality. The embers of the once crackling campfire glowed faintly in the darkness. Mark hesitated, contemplating whether to flee or investigate further. Despite the lingering fear, a gnawing curiosity compelled him to explore the uncanny occurrence. He cautiously approached the spot where the light had enveloped him, searching for any trace of the unearthly phenomena. In the moonlit clearing, the ground bore no signs of disturbance, no footprints, no markings, as if the strange events had left no physical imprint on the world. The forest, once a familiar haven, now seemed elusive and enigmatic. Mark's flashlight flickered as he scanned the surroundings, casting long, dancing shadows that heightened his apprehension. The whispers returned, a faint echo in the stillness. Mark's name lingered in the air like a haunting refrain. It was as if the very fabric of reality held a memory of the spectral chant. Unable to shake the feeling of being watched, Mark retraced his steps toward the tent. He zipped it closed, a feeble attempt to create a barrier between himself and the unseen forces at play. As he settled back into his sleeping bag, the whispers intensified. This time, they were accompanied by ghostly figures that danced on the periphery of his vision. Shadows took shape, contorting into indistinct forms that seemed to materialize and dissipate in the blink of an eye. Mark's breath caught as the figures drew nearer, their spectral presence sending shivers down his spine. With each passing moment, the forest transformed into a surreal dreamscape. Mark felt like a pawn in a cosmic game, a witness to forces beyond comprehension. The boundary between the tangible and the ethereal blurred, and the haunting whispers now resonated within his very being. The moon, once a comforting beacon, now cast an otherworldly glow that accentuated the eeriness of the surroundings. Mark's surroundings pulsed with an unnatural energy, and a sense of inevitability settled over him. The whispers reached a crescendo, merging into a symphony of disembodied voices that seemed to beckon him into the heart of the enigma. Driven by an inexplicable compulsion, Mark unzipped the tent once more, stepping into the moonlit clearing. The figures converged, swirling around him in a spectral dance. The whispers, now harmonious and hypnotic, guided him deeper into the woods. Mark moved as if in a trance, following the ethereal trail that seemed to lead to the heart of the mysterious occurrence. The forest, once a backdrop to his camping retreat, had become a stage for the unknown. The haunting whispers and spectral figures guided Mark into a realm where reality and unreality intertwined. As he ventured further into the depths of the night, a chilling realization gripped him. He was entangled in a surreal dance with forces beyond his understanding, and the true nature of the enigma awaited him in the heart of the spectral woods. The night was dense with an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves in the chilling breeze. A crescent moon hung low in the sky, casting feeble shadows that danced among the trees. John, an avid camper, had decided to embark on a solo adventure deep into the heart of the ominous Blackwood Forest. Ignoring the warnings of locals about strange occurrences after sundown, he pitched his tent near the edge of a moonlit clearing. As the campfire flickered, its feeble flames casting long shadows on the surrounding trees. John tried to shake off the unease settling in his stomach. The darkness beyond the fire's glow seemed to thicken with each passing moment, and the forest whispered secrets that only the bravest dared to comprehend. John, however, dismissed these ominous feelings as mere figments of his imagination. He zipped himself into his sleeping bag, the nylon cocoon providing a false sense of security. The forest sounds intensified, each snap of a twig or hoot of an owl resonating with an unsettling echo. Closing his eyes, John attempted to drown out the disconcerting symphony, reassuring himself that he was just another visitor in nature's grand theater. Time passed slowly, and just as John began to drift into a restless slumber, he was startled awake by an unnatural sound. It was a faint whisper, indistinguishable words carried by the wind. He strained his ears, his heart pounding, trying to decipher the message. The forest around him seemed to hold its breath, as if anticipating his reaction. John dismissed it as a trick of the wind, convincing himself that fear was playing tricks on his mind. Unable to shake off the sense of foreboding, John decided to take a walk around the clearing, believing movement would dispel the uneasy feeling creeping up his spine. As he ventured into the darkness, the moonlight played tricks with the shadows, distorting the shapes of the towering trees into grotesque figures that seemed to watch his every move. His flashlight pierced the inky blackness, revealing gnarled branches and twisted roots that resembled skeletal fingers reaching out from the earth. The forest floor crunched beneath his boots, a symphony of unsettling noises accompanying each step. A distant howl echoed through the trees, sending shivers down John's spine. The air turned colder, and John quickened his pace, attempting to retrace his steps back to the safety of his campsite. However, the once familiar path now seemed to twist and contort, leading him deeper into the heart of the foreboding Blackwood forest. Panic set in as the whispers returned, growing louder and more insistent, their unintelligible words clawing at the edges of his sanity. Suddenly, the flashlight flickered and died, plunging John into complete darkness. He fumbled for his phone, the feeble glow of its screen barely illuminating his surroundings. As he strained to make out his location, the forest fell silent, a pregnant pause that seemed to last an eternity. Then, a bone-chilling voice, both distant and impossibly close, whispered his name from the shadows. John. A cold sweat broke out on his forehead as he stood frozen, the air thick with an otherworldly presence. The voice spoke again, more urgent this time, as if it knew something he didn't. Run, John. Run before it finds you. The forest erupted into a cacophony of unearthly sounds, and John, fueled by a primal fear, sprinted blindly into the night, the twisted trees and tangled underbrush becoming an indistinguishable blur. His breath came in ragged gasps, and the forest seemed to warp and bend around him, as if mocking his attempts to escape. The unseen pursuer whispered tauntingly, its voice echoing through the twisted labyrinth of trees. Run, John, but you can't escape. It's always watching. Panic gripped him, and he stumbled over unseen roots and uneven terrain. The forest seemed alive, malevolent, as if it had a will of its own. He dared not look back, fearing what might be lurking in the shadows. The ground beneath his feet shifted, and the trees closed in around him, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The whispers grew louder, forming a haunting chorus that reverberated through the night. His surroundings became a disorienting maze, and John felt the very fabric of reality unraveling. Desperation guided his movements, leading him deeper into the heart of the forest. The moon, now obscured by thick clouds, offered no solace. A cold wind moaned through the trees, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and decay. Just when he thought he could run no more, the forest abruptly opened into a small clearing. In its center stood an ancient, gnarled tree with branches that seemed to writhe like serpents. A foreboding aura emanated from it, and the whispers converged into a chilling chant that seemed to echo from the very depths of the earth. John, you cannot escape. Embrace the darkness. He stumbled backward, his back pressing against the twisted trunk of a nearby tree. The clearing pulsed with an otherworldly energy, and the ground beneath him felt alive as if it hungered for his presence. Shadows coalesced around the ancient tree, forming a shape that seemed to defy reality. A figure emerged, its silhouette shifting and contorting. As it stepped into the dim moonlight, John's blood ran cold. It was a grotesque entity, a fusion of shadows and malevolence. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, fixated on him with an inscrutable hunger. "John," it rasped, its voice a cacophony of echoing whispers. "You ventured where you shouldn't have. Now, you belong to the night." Paralyzed by fear, John could only watch as the creature advanced, its form undulating like a wraith. The whispers reached a crescendo, drowning out his own terrified heartbeat. In that haunting moment, he realized he had trespassed into a realm beyond human understanding. As the creature reached out, its fingers stretching like tendrils, a blinding light erupted from the horizon. The night recoiled, and the creature shrieked in agony. The moon emerged from behind the clouds, casting its ethereal glow upon the clearing. In the newfound radiance, the creature withered and dissipated, leaving only the haunting echoes of its whispers. The forest, once a nightmarish maze, returned to a semblance of normalcy. The ancient tree stood silent, its branches no longer animated by unseen forces. John, still trembling, found himself on the edge of the clearing. The whispers lingered in the air, but they now held a forlorn quality. The night had taken its toll, leaving an indelible mark on his soul. As dawn approached, casting away the remnants of darkness, John stumbled out of the blackwood forest. The eerie silence was replaced by the sounds of waking birds and rustling leaves. The once menacing shadows now danced with the soft light of morning. He vowed never to speak of that night, haunted by the knowledge that some horrors lurk just beyond the veil of perception, waiting for those who dare to venture alone at night. The blackwood forest, forever etched in his memory, stood as a testament to the thin boundary between the known and the unknowable.